Ever feel like international politics is like watching some crazy telenovela, but with like way higher stakes?
Yeah.
Well, today's deep dive takes us south of the border, right, to Mexico,
Oh, yeah.
where the war on drugs is bumping up against, some serious questions about national sovereignty.
Hmm.
So the U.S. just labeled 6 Mexican drug cartels as terrorist organizations.
Mm.
And to say Mexico's not happy about this,
Right.
well, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
I mean, the U.S. is saying this is all about, like, turning up the heat on these cartels.
Hmm.
But Mexico, they're worried about what this could actually mean for them.
Yeah.
Like, does this give the U.S. an excuse to intervene, send troops,
Hmm.
get more involved in a way that Mexico really doesn't want?
Yeah, it's tricky.
So that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
Uh,
How is Mexico pushing back against this?
mhm.
And what does this whole thing mean for the future of not just the drug war, but also like the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico?
Big questions.
Big questions, yeah. So to kick things off, we've got some fascinating stuff to work with here, right? I mean, we've got statements from the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum.
Right.
We've got analysis from, experts on both sides of the border
Yeah.
trying to make sense of all this,
Definitely.
We're also seeing how different media outlets are framing this whole thing.
Right.
So a lot to dig into. And it's interesting because, Mexico's president, she isn't just like letting this slide.
No.
She's not just complaining or protesting.
Right.
She's actually fired back with some pretty significant proposed reforms to Mexico's constitution.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty big move.
That's not something, I mean, you just don't just change your constitution on a whim.
Exactly.
It tells you just how seriously they're taking this,
Yeah, and I think to understand why this is such a big deal,
Yeah.
we've got to, remember the history here.
Okay, yeah.
The U.S. has a long history of intervening in Latin America, Mexico included. And so anytime they see anything that could give the U.S. more power within their borders, it's like, woo, red flags, right?
Yeah.
It triggers some deep-seated concerns.
So, okay, these constitutional reforms, like, what are they about specifically?
So basically, they're all about tightening up the rules around what foreign agents can do in Mexico.
Okay.
And when we say foreign agents, we're talking mainly about, law enforcement
Gotcha.
and intelligence officials operating on Mexican soil.
Okay.
And these changes would, require much stricter regulations and oversight of anything they do.
So it's almost like Mexico saying, okay, you can come in, but these are the rules. You play by our rules.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really important point you're making.
Yeah.
It's all about establishing those clear boundaries.
Right.
So there's no ambiguity.
Right, yeah. And this isn't totally out of the blue, right?
No.
Because the previous president of Mexico, he had already started putting some legal limits on how foreign agents can operate.
He did?
So is this like building on what he started?
Yeah, absolutely. This takes it a step further, though, right? It's not just laws. It's like
Right.
enshrining these limitations at the very top.
Wow, yeah.
Constitution. It's a big statement.
It is a big statement, yeah.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how this is being received in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like, are they seeing this as a legitimate attempt by Mexico to protect its sovereignty?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it more like they see this as an obstacle to, the drug war and trying to stop these cartels?
It's probably a bit of both, to be honest. I mean, the U.S. argument is that these cartels, they're a problem that crosses borders, right? It's transnational. And to tackle it effectively, they need everyone on the same page.
Right, yeah.
But from Mexico's perspective,
Right.
it's about more than just that.
Yeah.
It's about their own history, their own sense of independence, and being in control of their own affairs.
Right. And one quote from Sheinbaum really, stuck out to me.
Yep.
She said, "Mexico will not allow any outside investigations or prosecutions without our express authorization and collaboration." I mean, that's pretty clear, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a very clear message. And it's a message that goes beyond just the cartels, even.
Right.
It's about Mexico asserting its right to say, hey, these are our problems. We'll handle them.
Yeah. And then there's this other really interesting part of this whole situation, right?
Yeah. What's that?
Mexico is saying that they're actually going to start cracking down harder on foreigners who are involved in gun trafficking. I mean, that's a pretty big shift, right?
Yeah, it's significant.
Because for a long time, Mexico's been arguing that, the U.S. needs to do more to stop the flow of all these guns across the border.
Right.
And this kind of puts that issue front and center again. It's almost like they're saying, okay, You want to talk about shared responsibility? Let's talk about where all these guns are actually coming from.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's a way of like turning the tables a little bit, right? And shifting the focus back to the U.S.'s role in this whole mess.
Right. So, okay, big question here. What happens next?
Yeah, what does this all mean going forward?
Where do we go from here? Like, what are the possible outcomes of this whole back and forth?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's hard to say for sure. I mean, it's definitely possible that, both sides could try to find some common ground here
Right.
and actually work together more effectively. But there's also a real risk that this could actually lead to more tension and distrust between the two countries.
Right, yeah.
So it all comes down to whether the U.S. and Mexico can figure out a way to collaborate
Right.
while still respecting each other's, concerns and priorities.
Yeah, yeah. And to me, what's clear is that, like, Mexico's drawing a line in the sand here. They're basically saying, look, we're willing to be partners, but we're not going to just be told what to do.
Right.
And that makes you really wonder, what does this mean for the whole drug war in the long run?
Yeah.
Like, could this be the beginning of, a more equal partnership where both sides are working together more effectively? Or will this, like, push these two countries further apart?
Yeah, it's a really crucial moment, I think. And it raises some big questions about, like, how do we deal with transnational crime in a way that respects national sovereignty?
Right, yeah. So a lot for everyone to think about. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
See you next time.
See ya.